Hey y'all, Nacho here. It's time for the number 7 one. Yippee, 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 yeah. Yeah. Anyway, now time for Unfrantic Fanfic 7, The Roaring Right. The bustling city of Japanifornia had gotten embroiled in a deep controversy with no end in sight. After the destruction of Green Dolphin Street Prison, details were released about a potentially manipulated trial, where a group of 4 prominent figures were given life in prison for a vehicular manslaughter charge. Normally, a charge of this variety would have warranted some prison time, but not life without the possibility of parole. Due to this, more distrust had been placed upon the courts and other law institutions that had maintained this system. Many missed the days where heroic lawyer Pheonix Wright graced the courtroom with his presence, though few knew where he was now. Where he was now just so happened to be a crumbly made shelter in an abandoned construction site. A former client had managed to help him set it up, but even then it only offered rudimentary protection from the heat and rain. Ever since he abandoned his client, Bowser, during a very public murder trial, his reputation was completely ruined among the law sphere for quitting on a client mid-trial. Pheonix was passed out in the corner of the room, with a well-loved Hasbro elephant sitting next to him. He was in a deep sleep, dreaming of adventures in a strange world alongside said elephant, who he had affectionately named Rory King. He was completely unaware of a pair of strange visitors watching them atop a nearby rooftop. Leaning over the rooftop, a young woman with purple hair and golden jewelry appeared at the washed-up lawyer. She turned back to another purple-haired woman, this one wearing brilliant red designer clothes and a long scarf. "Master Rose, are we sure this is the man you saw in your vision?" The other woman nodded. Walking over to her apprentice and standing next to her, she too peered out at the man. Pheonix had unconsciously begun to hug the elephant tightly, resting his head on its deflated trunk. Rose sighed softly. She lifted a hand to her chin. "I'm afraid so, Menat. This man is the one I saw who would both bring about the end of the world, before potentially saving it. Fate has decreed it so." Both heard a chittering noise behind them, and turned to see a swarm of bats fluttering onto the rooftop behind them. It was odd enough seeing this in the daylight, but an odder sight came about when they began to reform into a man. He wore extremely fancy clothes adorned with crosses, looking like a gentleman ripped straight from the 1800s. He took a wooden pipe from his mouth as he blew some smoke into the clear sky. "Apologies for the delay, Rose. Sharon insisted I put on another layer of sunscreen. So like being out in a bit of sunlight will kill me or anything." He chuckled as he approached the two. Rose smiled sincerely as she turned to the man. "Slayer, a pleasure to see you here. Seems you are the only one who was able to make it here in time. Everyone else in the world, Warrior's Discord server, was either preoccupied or didn't believe my precognition." The vampire flashed his fangs as he returned her expression with a toothy grin. "Of course I wouldn't miss this. The apocalypse isn't something you see just every day. Sharon and I had to see what was up." Menat looked back at the homeless lawyer, before glancing back at the 2 older fighters. "Guys, I think he's waking up." The other two joined her at the building's edge, as Slayer passed Rose a pair of opera glasses so she could get a better view. Menat seemed tense watching the stirring lawyer as he let go of the elephant. Down below, Pheonix was in fact waking up, though not of his own volition. He heard a burrowing noise coming from in front of the shelter, and opened his baggy eyes to see what was up. The ground broke open, revealing an armored dwarf digging a tunnel with a rusted shovel. In the dwarf's left hand, he held a PlayStation Portable that was playing the UMD for Spider-Man 2. He paused the movie upon seeing the homeless man, before coming over to investigate. He was immediately repulsed by the sheer stank of alcohol and piss that was radiating off this man. Pheonix didn't look any better than he smelled. Sporting a 4 o'clock shadow and sagging eye bags that made it clear he hadn't bathed in months. To the dwarf and the rest of the world, he just looked like some fuck-ass guy with a blue beanie and gray hoodie, stripped of all his hopes and dreams. Now, the dwarf was a good-hearted fellow, so he fought off the stank enough to approach the man. He put his PSP in his pocket and reached into his hat, pulling out a stick of Old Spice deodorant and a travel bottle of shampoo. Phoenix's eyes lit up a little as he saw the cleaning supplies being handed to him.
"Here you go, buddy,"
the dwarf said in a gruff voice.
"I don't mean to be rude, but you kinda smell. You really need a shower, dog."
Pheonix smiled weakly before taking the deodorant and carefully applying it to his armpits. Thank you so much. You don't know what this means. I've already given up on so many things. Smelling better was already one of them. A frown crossed the dwarf's face as Pheonix let out an agonized sigh. In a flash, he loaded Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker on his PSP before handing it to the lawyer. His frown turned upside down as he tried to look hopeful to cheer up the lawyer.
Here's something to keep your mind off things. Though I'll ask for it back in a bit. I've also got Spider-Man 2 on here if you want to watch that.
Timidly, the exhausted lawyer took the console in his hands. It took him a second to process the gift, but he eventually responded. Thank you. Wait, you mean the Tobey Maguire one? He felt the dwarf's gloved hand clasp onto his shoulder reassuredly as he nodded.
Yeah, that one. Go nuts, man.
So the lawyer did just that, starting the movie and watching it intently as a tear ran down his face. It had been so long since someone had done something so kind for him. He looked up to thank the dwarf as the opening credits played, but he was nowhere to be seen. Wright rubbed his eyes and stood up. Hello? Where did you go? The dwarf poked his head up from a few meters away.
I'm right here, dude. Just digging my tunnel.
Oh, okay. Thanks for the film, though. Pheonix sat down as the dwarf gave him a quick thumbs up. Wright continued to intently watch the movie, a forlorn expression crossing his face as the scene played between Aunt May and Spider-Man. Something about this scene spoke to him. It always had before, but never more than this moment. Everyone loves a hero. People line up for them, cheer them, scream their names. And years later, they'll tell how they stood in the rain for hours just to get a glimpse of the one who taught them how to hold on a second longer. I believe there's a hero in all of us. That keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble, and finally allows us to die with pride. He was taken out of his viewing experience by the sounds of hasty footsteps rushing towards him. Both he and the dwarf looked up to see a purple dinosaur girl followed by a round blue fellow. Hey! Susie yelled as she rushed up to the lawyer. You're that right guy, aren't you? We really need your help! Lancer frowned behind her.
They said I did a no-no with the law. I can't survive prison.
Pheonix lowered the PSP, prepared to give his usual response to this sort of question. He prepared to tell them that he wasn't who they were looking for. They didn't practice law anymore. However, something about that scene with Aunt May stuck with him. He was a hero, damn it! The longer he spent wasting away here was time spent not spent saving lives. With a deep breath, he glanced towards the dwarf, who nodded back to him reassuringly. He faced the duo before giving a confident smile. Yep, Pheonix Wright of Wright & Co. Law Offices. How can I help? The dwarf climbed out of his hole, smiling as he leaned onto his shovel. Susie spoke quickly and nervously. Look, I don't know what the hell happened, but Lancer was just fucking around in Castletown when some cops showed up and grabbed him. They said we had to be at court in 5 days, but didn't tell us shit aside from that. She repeatedly gestured to Lancer, who was busy exploring the dwarf's expressive tunnel. Hearing the details of the case, Pheonix thought over accepting it. Sure, it was going to be hard to defend someone who didn't even know what they were on trial for. If he was allowed to walk the streets right now, it shouldn't have been anything serious. Besides, the defendant looked like a kid no older than 10. Alright, I'll accept. But I gotta prepare a bit first. When's the trial? Susie's eyebrows raised, surprised he actually accepted. It's tomorrow, actually. Is that too soon? Nope. Just need some time to get cleaned up and read up on, Darkner law, I guess? That guy's a Darkner, right? Susie nodded as Wright pushed himself up. I believe I've got some books back at the old office. Rent should have been on autopay, so they probably haven't kicked me out yet. Before Wright could leave, the dwarf stood up and walked over to him, using his shovel like some sort of staff.
Mind if I join, man? I could use a good story to tell.
Pheonix smiled and nodded. Why not? The more the merrier. Besides, I'll have to see if I can get back in touch with Maya. He gave Susie a firm handshake before grabbing his elephant, and he began the trek back to his old office. Susie smiled as Lancer traipsed over to her side. We'll get you off the hook, man. One way or another. Along the way, Pheonix and the dwarf both stopped at a public bathhouse to use the showers. While the dwarf wasn't as smelly as the hobo, he still stank a little from digging for so long. Eventually, once the two had thoroughly cleaned themselves, they made their way to the office in one of the cheaper parts of town. Wright was elated to find that his keycard to get in still worked, and after a brief elevator ride, they found themselves inside of Pheonix's old office. It looked frozen in time, as though barely anything had changed beside how much dust had layered the furniture. The dwarf decided to make himself busy cleaning the place as Pheonix sat down at his desk and began combing through one of Mia's old books on Darkner Law. As he tried to contact Maya, it was almost as if he could feel his mentor's spirit watching over him once more. Tomorrow came rather quickly, and Pheonix Wright once again found himself standing in front of the Japanifornia Municipal Courtroom. His iconic blue blazer had been freshly pressed, thanks to the dwarf knowing a good dry cleaner. In his hand he clutched his childhood elephant, which he had brought as a good luck charm. The PSP Dwarf had also gotten cleaned up, wearing a coal-black suit with a red bow tie that was covered up by his well-trimmed beard. He had made sure said suit had a pocket big enough to store his pride and joy and a couple discs, just in case they were needed. Before Pheonix and the dwarf could enter, they heard a taxi screech to a halt beside them. They only got a glimpse of a large orange dog in the driver's seat when the door opened, and a familiar face rushed out. "Nick!" Maya screamed as she ran up and hugged the lawyer tightly. Pheonix was caught off guard by the hug, but after collecting himself a bit, he managed to speak. "Maya? You actually got my calls?" "Of course I did, dummy," she chuckled. "I wouldn't miss your first case back for the world. By the way, can I borrow some money to pay the taxi fare?" The lawyer's elated expression turned sour. "I swear, nothing ever changes." He began digging around in his wallet to fish out some cash. Before he could do so, though, the PSP Dwarf wandered over and knocked on the passenger side door. The window rolled down to reveal a small yellow cat sitting next to his much larger dog counterpart. The dwarf glanced at the fare before dropping a small handful of gold coins into the cat's paws, before the two sped off to pick up another passenger. Pheonix and Maya watched as he wandered back over and put his hand out to the medium.
Her name's Percival Stonepiercer, but friends call me Percy. Professional miner and gamer.
With a soft smile, Maya took his hand. "Maya Fey, Spirit Medium and Recreational Legal Counsel. Nice to meet you. Guessing you'll be along for the ride today?" Percy gave an enthusiastic nod before the trio entered the courthouse. As Maya and Percy struck up a conversation in the waiting room, Pheonix nervously explored the courthouse he had abandoned so long ago. That's when he spotted someone. That's when he spotted her. It didn't take long for her to spot him either. Franziska von Karma. The infamous prosecutor who oversaw the last case he had taken on before his self-inflicted exile. Well. Seems like someone's finally dragged himself out of the gutter. Even your last client got out in bail faster than you got off the streets. Good to see you too, Franziska, Pheonix said bluntly as the prosecutor brandished her whip that she was somehow allowed to bring into the courtroom. I assume we're both here for the same reason, then? Franziska smirked as she handed Pheonix a set of documents, which he promptly put under his arm. Indeed, it brings me no joy to have to prosecute a child like this, but I assure you, Wright, I will not lose to the likes of you. She smirked before stomping off towards the preparation room. Pheonix took a deep breath before turning around and walking back towards the lobby. The time soon came for the courtroom to start filling up, though where once the gallery had been packed with spectators, it now seemed to be half full. Susie sat in some somewhat nice clothes borrowed from Chris's brother as she glanced around the courtroom to try and take her mind off things. She first spotted Lancer in a defendant's seat, bouncing up and down like he didn't have a care in the world. It didn't take long for Susie to realize this was some sort of nervous tic for him. Her eyes were then drawn to the man sitting next to her, a dwarf playing Secret Agent Clank on a PSP. Susie watched his gameplay for a while before she glanced across the gallery to spot an array of odd people on the other side. Two of them looked like some sort of fortune tellers, one far older and the other far younger. Another looked like a well-groomed British dandy who sat with who she could only presume was his wife. Before she could question them any further, a cough drew her eyes over to the judge, who stood before the stand seemingly arguing with himself over whether or not to prepare some popcorn for the proceedings. She took a deep breath as she watched the two lawyers file into the room, her own, followed by another damn fortune teller. Once the two lawyers had taken their place, the judge pounded his gavel to silence the room.
All rise,
he said in a stern tone as all present rose before promptly sitting back down. Pheonix watched nervously as the judge lifted up a piece of paper and read over the trial's information.
We gather here today for the trial of Lancer Chaos, who has been charged with the crime of...
The judge's eyes went wide as his stern tone left, turning far more goofy and elderly sounding as it seemed like an entirely different person took hold of his body.
Illegal modification of a vehicle?
He glanced at the defendant with a look of pure befuddlement on his face. Said defendant was currently trying to dig a hole in the carpet and was failing miserably.
You are at the right trial, correct? Wait, you're literally 8! How do you even have a vehicle to modify illegally?
As the judge began a semi-heated discussion with the bailiffs about if this was the right trial, Susie gave a disappointed look to Lancer. The two had known each other long enough to be able to communicate using only lip-reading and expressions. Of course, she had to make said disappointment known by catching his attention with a wave and mouthing into a simple question.
The bike?
Lancer shot back with his own slightly upset look.
Motorcycle! It's a motorcycle! And once this trial is over, the DMV will finally believe me.
Susie let out an audible sigh, earning a slight glance from Percy sitting next to her.
Look, cut the damn semantics, she mouthed back to her homie. Listen, you gotta lock the hell in, or else you're headed to the big house. Just don't screw this up.
Both stopped when they heard the judge pound his gavel. His stern tone had returned.
Right. So this is the right trial. Are both the prosecution and defense ready?
Both sides gave the required response, satisfying him with a simple, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge nodded before clearing his throat.
Understood. The prosecution may begin their opening remarks.
Pheonix stood behind the defendant's desk, sweating as he tried to figure out what to do. He stared forward at the evidence on display in the center of the courtroom. It was the client's bicycle, which was currently and perpetually on fire. He stood there and groaned quietly, trying to conceptualize the best way to defend such a ridiculous case. Pheonix knew that if he lost this case, his reputation would likely be in the gutter once again, and he would have to return to the streets. He only just now noticed that Franziska had already been making arguments this whole time.
Your Honor, this so-called modification shows blatant disrespect for the statement of the public,
she said smarmily as she stared directly at Pheonix. This immediately got in his head as he tried to think of a rebuttal. Suddenly he heard a voice, loud and clear, speaking in his mind. It was his mentor, Mia Fey, speaking to him from beyond the grave.
Pheonix, remember what I taught you!
The entire court was staring at him by now as he looked around, listening intently to her voice. A memory began to return to the lawyer, a memory of the day she taught him how to ride a bike, using some very nifty training wheels. He was always fond of them, and always took his bike to work since he was too much of a broke-ass bitch to get a car. Confidence welled up in Pheonix as he shouted out and interrupted Franziska's next remark.
Objection!
All eyes were on him as he stood proudly and pointed at his opponent. Yes, for the most part vehicle mods are illegal, but this is a bike. Sure, setting it on fire is a little extreme, but is it that much different from modifying a bike with a set of training wheels or a bell? This is perfectly legal! Silence was maintained through the courtroom, and the judge nodded, speaking in his more senile voice.
Yes, I suppose that makes sense.
He suddenly screamed as he heard a loud whip crack from the prosecutor's side.
Objection! Your Honor, setting fire to a vehicle, regardless of what it is still public endangerment. If this thing were to go out in the streets with that thing, he could burn the whole city down.
Lancer raised his hand like he was a first grader who had to use the bathroom.
Ooh, I did that once! My dad got really mad at me and took away my spades for a week.
Both Susie and Pheonix stared open-mouthed at Lancer's confession. Whispers could be heard from the gallery as Franziska laughed confidently.
See? Even he admits it.
She chortled out as she struck her whip against the desk again.
I suggest we confiscate this vehicle and revoke his license, though depending on the severity of said fire,
perhaps the death penalty may even be necessary. Pheonix was now in utter shock. His client had just confessed to an even worse crime. He had no clue what he was supposed to do in the situation, as he never had to defend a self-admitted arsonist before. He started to sweat as Franziska laughed, fearing that this case was already lost. It's when Mia appeared again, hovering next to him.
Right. Think. Where is Lancer from?
Chicago? Pheonix answered nervously as his mind had gone completely blank. Mia shook her head, emphatically.
No! He's from a dark world. And what are dark worlds?
He tried to think, but kept coming up blank. A place where it's always dark?
This was met with a loud sigh from Mia.
Pheonix, I thought you read that book last night. Remember, dark worlds are places made by dark fountains. The fountains give life to everyday objects and create a world around them. Once that fountain is closed, the objects just go back to being just normal objects.
Pheonix stared at her, obviously confused. Before he could even ask, she went ahead and told him her point.
Lancer didn't burn down a city. He just burnt some cardboard boxes or something.
A bright smile crossed Phoenix's face. Oh, I get it now. Thanks, Mia. Her spirit and voice disappeared from his mind, as he now realized he did not in fact get it, and was still a tad confused with the concept. Truthfully, Pheonix was completely unprepared to make his next move, but he went with it anyway.
Objection!
Shock and befuddlement ran rampant across the courtroom. All present were confused on how any lawyer, regardless of how skilled or unskilled they were, could be able to argue against a confession of guilt. In the stands, those who supported Pheonix were in disarray. Susie held her snout in her hands, audibly groaning as Percy tried dissociating with his PSP. Menat was clutching her hanging sleeves tightly, as Slayer held tight to his wife Sharon. He puffed on his pipe as a nervous tick, though he had replaced the tobacco with bubbles due to the courtroom's ban on tobacco. Everyone in the room awaited Phoenix's argument like news reporters hanging on the silence before an important figure answered a crucial question. They could not have received a more careful, yet clumsy, attempt at an argument.
Your Honor, Lancer is a Darkener, yes? Pheonix smugly questioned.
It took a second for the judge to think about it, before he answered in his more senile voice.
Yeah, I guess so.
And Darkeners are just objects brought to life by a dark fountain, right?
Why, yes, they are.
The judge exclaimed, excited to see where this was going. Pheonix crossed his arms and nodded. A smug expression came over his face as he pointed to Franziska.
Lancer, despite being a Darkener, is only a mere jack of spades in the real world, and everything and everyone else in the Card Kingdom are just the same.
The judge went wide, his stern tone returning.
Yes, we know this, Mr. Wright. What are you trying to say?
Isn't it obvious? He said as he smiled and shook his head. If all of these Darkeners were just ordinary objects, then burning down an entire city would be no different than setting fire to a couple boxes. Malicious mischief, maybe, but legally no death occurred aside from property damage. The courtroom gasped at this revelation. Susie pumped her fists from the stands. Sure, she didn't like the whole Darkeners are just objects angle. If it got Lancer off the hook, she'd be all for it. Franziska gritted her teeth as she saw the gallery murmuring and the judge thinking over this line of reasoning. She snapped her whip, trying to regain control over the situation.
Objection! If Darkeners are just ordinary objects in the real world, then explain to me how he...
She stopped her line of reasoning to point at Lancer, who had finally made some leeway and was starting to dig a hole in the carpet.
is able to talk to us now. There isn't a dark fountain to be seen.
A nervous expression crossed Phoenix's face as he looked at the judge, who was clearly considering this.
She makes a good point, Mr. Wright. Do you have any way to prove your claim?
More panic came over Phoenix's face as his plan began to crumble before his eyes. Maya glanced over, concerned as she watched him frantically dig through the evidence box for anything that could help his case. Sweat rained down his face as his search came up mostly empty. He muttered to himself under his breath. Shit, I don't have anything! The courtroom was quiet, awaiting his response. Susie could barely watch at this point, and had left to the bathroom to try and avoid the incoming verdict. Mia Fey showed up once more, now visibly annoyed. Pheonix. Wright paused to search for a moment, looking towards Mia as she'd raise a finger up. I don't like resorting to this, but we have to invalidate that argument. Pheonix, you have to make a dark fountain, here in this courtroom. It was then that Pheonix realized how right Mia was. All he had to do was create a dark fountain right there in the courtroom to prove everything once and for all. Franziska would have no ground to stand on, and her argument would be invalidated. Nervously, he turned towards the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to request a knife be brought to the stand. I need to use it to demonstrate something for this case. The judge was utterly baffled, quietly gasping in response to such a bizarre claim. After some consideration, though, he'd allow for it. The court representative brought a knife to Pheonix as he'd step out from the defense's side into the middle of the courtroom. He recalled what he'd read in that book before, though he never thought he'd have to bring that into practice. Put all of your will and determination in, and stab the ground. Up in the gallery, Menat nervously turned towards Rose, who sat there stone-faced. She whispered as to disrupt the proceedings. Master, this is how it begins, isn't it? Can't we stop him? Rose did not turn to face her, simply staring at the knife.
It would indeed seem that way. And yet, this is far more of a noble cause than I expected from a lawyer. For now, we must remain observers of fate, unfortunately, and simply respond to whatever its will brings about from here.
Pheonix held a knife to his chest. Crackling noises surrounding the courtroom as the entire room kept their eyes on him. At that moment, Susie came back from the bathroom only for her eyes to widen in shock at what her own lawyer was about to do. She was too late, and was only able to make a few steps into the courtroom before the defense attorney jumped into the air and violently stabbed the ground. As the knife made contact, it would stab deep into the carpet, deep into the floor. In short order, plumes of darkness began to escape from the wound in the earth and envelop the courtroom, plunging it into darkness. Wright gave a smug smile as he looked back towards the judge. Your Honor, the proof is right here. If there isn't a dark fountain to allow us to speak with Lancer, I just made one. He glanced towards Franziska, giving her a condescending look. Your point is now invalid. Before the prosecutor could respond, Susie grabbed Wright from behind by his shoulders. She shook him violently as she roared right in his ear.
What the hell did you just do?
Once the lawyer caught his bearings, he turned back to Susie. I created a dark fountain? Is there something wrong with that?
Yes!
They all heard a loud scream from somebody with a sort of meek voice come from the front of the courtroom. Ralsei had shoved open the court's double doors, storming towards the lawyer. His voice wavered, but he still kept up his angry demeanor.
Pheonix Wright, you dummy! You just opened a second dark fountain! Don't you know what that means? You're going to bring the roaring! The Titans are going to start spawning any second now!
Wait, a second fountain? Pheonix stammered out as he backed away from the now angered members of the fun gang. But there's only one here! Ralsei stared at him blankly, looking like he was going to have a generational crash out if nothing was done soon. At that moment, though, Rose floated down from the gallery, followed by Menat. Slayer stayed behind to dote on Sharon a little, but still kept a close eye on the situation. Rose approached the fountain, emanating a mystical power as the darkness continued to erupt.
I believe I can provide a suitable explanation.
The goat boy sighed as Susie looked at him in confusion.
You know this woman, Ralsei?
Small nod confirmed her question before Ralsei could give more of an explanation.
She's a magician who specializes in soul magic. We've worked together a bit before to create a grand fountain.
Indeed,
Rose responded as she began attempting to seal the fountain in front of her.
a strange man wearing two hats approached me about opening a large, stable dark fountain in the middle of a rural county in Texas. This would allow darkness created by other fountains to roam this earth, keeping their sentience and body in the process.
Once he finished, Ralsei turned towards Pheonix with a frown.
But opening a second fountain could cause the large one to destabilize and plunge the whole world into the roaring!
Pheonix shrugged as Maya came to his side, and Percy climbed down from the stands.
Look, how the hell was I supposed to know that? I didn't see I don't know shit about Texas!
Franziska stepped out from behind the prosecutor's desk.
I'll see to it that you're subpoenaed for this, right?
The judge nodded, having to change his position behind the desk in order to see the small crown beyond the fountain.
Despite this turn of events, I hereby determine that Pheonix Wright's argument is sound. We will resume court once the situation is taken care of, but I feel like a verdict will be reached shortly.
Susie went to check on Lancer, frowning as she realized he was already turning to stone. She hugged him tightly, whispering,
"We'll get this taken care of. Trust me, buddy."
In front of the fountain, Rose was beginning to work to seal it. Her own purple soul hovered in front of her body as she cast multiple spells. Menat watched closely. This was a good learning experience for her. However, the attention of all in the courtroom was caught when a hole was busted in the roof, causing everyone to look up and see the dark figure hovering above them. The roaring night stared down at them, laughing as it crossed its arms. Ralsei stepped back, surprised by their intrusion.
I thought we already defeated you!
Around them, the air grew cold as the night's cackles grew louder. Several blades formed above Rose, causing her to drop her spells as she focused on defending herself. She blocked 2 using a shielding spell before realizing the rest of them would hit. Slayer rushed in from the gallery and swept her out of the way with a quick slide, allowing the swords to plunge into the floor. Behind the 2, another dark fountain began to form, this one starting to solidify into a large gray mass. It began to crack and break as eyes appeared along its towering shell. Ralsei called to the others.
Crap! It's already forming a Titan! We need to evacuate the building. Hurry!
As more darkness began to envelop the room, the bailiffs, each turning into oddly colored-looking knights, swiftly escorted the remaining members of the gallery out of the room. The judge came down from the stands, lifting his robes to give him a tad more mobility as he joined the others. Phoenix's eyes darted to the little motley crew forming around him, only to spot something blue rising from his desk. His elephant had been transformed by the darkness, turning into Rory King from his dreams prior. As a couple Titan spawn formed, the elephant flew into the air, spinning its tail like a helicopter. It fired at the spawn, clearing a path as it flew towards the group. Phoenix's eyes widened as he opened his arms.
Rory? Buddy? You real?
Yes, my friend.
The Darker said as it flew at Phoenix, who wrapped him in a tight hug.
And I'm here to help.
As Phoenix embraced his new buddy, Susie joined them once more as she hefted the Lancer on her back. The defense attorney turned to the others, all while still hugging Rory King. We need to get to my office. We can take shelter there. Come on! He called out as he began rushing out of the courtroom, with the others following him. The knight's gaze turned to them, launching a volley of stars at the fleeing group of lawyers and bystanders. Before any of the projectiles could meet their mark, Slayer stepped in front of them, casually waving his hands around as he blocked each of the stars. The rest of the group turned to him befuddled as Sharon casually slid into their ranks. With a smirk, the vampires turned back to them.
You lot scurry out of here. I'll keep you covered. Besides, I've always wanted to square up against a Titan.
Everyone continued their escape as Slayer braced himself for a fight. Menat was the last to turn away as she watched him remove the metal crosses from his clothes. Rose shut the doors behind them as they rushed to the court parking lot, with Franziska and the judge both offering their cars to carpool over to the Wright & Co. law offices. As they sped through the city, they could see the skies growing darker yet darker. The Titan had already burst through the courthouse ceiling, roaring loudly as purple flashes could be seen coming from the partially destroyed building. It seemed to stagger a little as they watched the night fly off to another part of the city. Once they had arrived outside of the office building, the group wasted no time in rushing inside. As they did, the lighteners among them began to change. Maya, Rose, and Menat, and Franziska's outfits didn't shift much, as they already gave the essence of their abilities. They each did get far more ornate, though, taking on exaggerated features. Phoenix's blue blazer shifted into yellow armor. His hair was covered by a silly helmet with a large feather sticking out of it. He looked like some kind of cannoneer from a rather foppish military. Percy's suit and tie shifted into traditional dwarven armor. His PSP fell out of his pocket, shifting into a warhammer that he lugged behind him. The judge's robes had a similar transformation, though his armor looked slightly more rusty in parts. After a very awkward and tight elevator ride, everyone stumbled into Phoenix's office. Ralsei took a deep breath as he leaned over.
Right. Let's come up with a plan. Last time we fought the Titans, we had... I don't even want to say it,
he nervously said. Everyone looked at him nervously before Susie sighed and spoke up.
To save the worlds, there's only one way. We have to let Jerry save the day.
She sounded somewhat annoyed at that proposition, and immediately everyone understood why. Ralsei let out a drawn-out sigh, sitting on the office's couch.
Right. Well, the problem is that Jerry has a power known as Hello Cruel World. It causes him to peer in whatever space he isn't invited to. Problem is, if we actually want him here, he can't show up.
Maya's face scrunched up, remembering that time that Jerry wandered into Kurain Village and started bugging the residents about how the true magic in this world lies in cryptocurrency.
Do we really want that guy here?
Percy held his head in his hands, remembering when he once spelunked into a large cave while playing Madden 08 on the PSP, only for Jerry to try and convince him that the new Maddens were better.
I don't really know. It's between dealing with him and the end of the world, though.
He paused, heavily considering what he was about to say next.
I say we deal with him.
Everyone shared a nervous glance until Menat stepped forward and asked what was on nobody's mind.
Alright, so, that all being out there, how the heck do we find this guy?
At a moment, something came to Phoenix. He rushed towards Mia's collection of books and started to flip through one on previous court cases involving monsters. Hang on. Here! After he spoke, he stopped at one page with a smile. So, we all want Jerry to be here, right? After he spoke, everyone took a second to think before confirming. That means he won't just appear here. But what's stronger than just a wish? The long arm of the law! A previous court case between Jerry and the Supreme Court decided that it's unlawful for Jerry to be allowed within 1,000 feet of any school zone. An audible groan could be heard from the group as Franziska spoke up. Right. You seriously aren't suggesting we associate with a... you know... Phoenix's expression turned sour as Rory King took his place behind him. Oh, fuck no! Jerry didn't do anything, though. This was just a preventative measure to make sure he didn't indoctrinate any impressionable kids into using their parents' credit cards on crypto. Still, if we find a school zone, we find Jerry. Rose nodded along. Yes, that would be the best course of action. However, there is still the matter at hand of the massive dark fountain in the center of town. Not just that, but if whoever finds Jerry is to survive the journey, the Titans will have to be dealt with, and the night kept at bay. She turned back as she heard Susie cracking her knuckles. Easy! You can seal fountains, right? All we need to do is lobby inside one of those assholes and you can destroy him from there. Ooh! Menat called out as she raised her hand. I can help too! My soul power isn't as strong as Master's, but I can still fight. The group heard the loud sound of wood hitting wood, as they all turned to see the judge standing behind a table and banging a massive gavel against it. He cleared his throat before continuing in a stern tone.
Right. Then I believe we are settled. Pheonix, you, Maya, Franziska, and the goat go find Jerry. Sharon, you stay here and watch over the defender. I mean Lancer.
His tone shifted once more as he hefted the gavel over his shoulder.
As for the rest of us, we'll hold the Titans at bay. Those fuckers won't know what hit them. That's a court order right there. This place doesn't have a drive-thru, does it?
Franziska stood up, crossing her arms. I believe that's for the best. I believe any food that Wright would make would end up giving me food poisoning. Still, I'd be happy to come along and whip Jerry into shape. Let's go already! Ralsei yelled as the ends of his scarf wrapped around Pheonix and Maya's wrists, pulling them forward towards the elevators he and Franziska followed. Rory King hovered close behind, following them in. Once they had all gone down, Susie sat Lancer on the couch and gave him a pat on the head. Stay strong, buddy. We'll fix this. She brandished her axe as she followed Rose and Menat on the next elevator that came up. The judge was about to follow them, but noticed that Percy was still in the room, nervously clutching his hammer and staring at the elevator. The judge let the others go down, walking over to the dwarf and gesturing for him to follow him to the couch. As Percy took a seat on one end, the judge scooted Lancer over and sat down next to the dwarf. His normally stern tone seemed calmer in this instance.
Are you nervous?
He asked, reading the dwarf's expression. Percy leaned back on the sofa, hugging his PSP hammer tightly.
Yes, very. I've always resolved myself to try and intervene whenever someone needs my help. Usually it just involves a pep talk or a bit of pocket change. This is different. How do you do it?
Eh?
The judge said, his tone turning senile.
Well, I usually go with Dr. Squatch's beard oil. That stuff is strong. A little bit of it goes a long way.
Once more, his tone shifted.
No, you fool. He means this. Being a judge, stepping up in a crisis.
He loudly sighed.
Sorry, that guy can get a bit confused. Still, I don't really like presiding over murder cases. Nobody does. Things are always so tense.
And that Pheonix fellow always shouts way too loud, and that mean-ass woman always hurts me, and...
Again, my point is clear. Doing what's right doesn't always mean doing what feels comfortable. Sometimes justice is needed the most when you don't want to get involved. Right.
The dwarf said as he looked over his hammer, looking over the disc slot that was on top of the weapon.
You're right. I may not like it, but people need me out there. Pheonix needs me out there. I've never faced something so insurmountable before, but I got folks at my back. Thank you. Of course, and thank you for helping. It's very brave of you to volunteer yourself for this sort of thing. Take it from me.
I'm old!
I've seen a lot of things in my long life, enough to know that this decision doesn't come easy. The only decision harder than this sort of thing is trying to figure out what flavor... Oh, wait.
The only decision harder than this sort of thing is trying to figure out what flavor of popcorn we need for a trial.
Yeah, what he said. That is a very hard decision. Still, you've got a good head on your shoulders, and a kind soul in your chest. We'll be just fine.
As the judge spoke... As the judge spoke, as Worf listened along as he tried an experiment, he put his Spider-Man 2 UMD inside the slot on his hammer. Once the judge finished, he pushed a button in the hammer's hilt that had popped up. A web shot out from the top of the hammer, surprising both men in the room. It latched onto the window before pulling Percy along with it. He screamed as he crashed through the window, flying out into the street. The judge rushed over to the ledge, smiling as he spoke in a senile voice.
That's the spirit! See you out there, Mr. Hobbit!
He rushed back towards the elevator, ready to do what he could to save his city. Meanwhile, Percy was free-falling towards the street outside. He clicked the button on his hammer once again, attaching a web to the top of the building. Trying to remember how Spider-Man did it in the movie, he moved his hammer to launch him forward in the street. He began to swing from building to building, a smile growing on his face as he looked over the city. By now, 4 Titans had spawned, and each were storming through the darkened city. One of them, the one from the courthouse, was far bigger than the others. He swung past one of the Titans, watching as the city's hero force, the Sense of Right Alliance, tried their hardest to bring it down, but to little effect. He swung by another shortly after, watching as Susie landed a Rude Buster into his face before Menat swung a spell at it. Rose seemed to be charging up some sort of spell. He moved past them as he swung further towards the courthouse, watching as the 3rd Titan punched down its Slayer on top of a building. Glowing with intense purple energy, the vampire managed to hold back the Titan's fist. He latched another web onto the Titan's face armor, flinging towards it and striking it with his hammer. This caused the beast to stagger, allowing Slayer to use his pile bunker at full power through the beast's chest. As he burst out the other side, he gave Percy a thumbs up as the Spider Dwarf swung off to go help some fleeing citizens escape some Titan spawn. Nearby, Pheonix ran down a street towards the nearest school zone. He panted loudly as he took up the rear of his group. The man had barely kept in shape compared to the physically active Franziska and the more training-focused Maya. Even Ralsei had kept ahead of him due to his ability to levitate. Rory King kept the spawn at bay by hovering over the group and firing at any that threatened to attack him. Any he missed that were picked off by Franziska's now much longer whip that had gained some sort of teal flame effect. "To the right!" Pheonix shouted as the group all rushed around a street corner as several spawn were hot on their tail. In front of them, they all spotted a nearby elementary school, and sure enough, there was Jerry, lazily swinging on one of the playground swings. He stared at his phone closely, likely either day trading or posting misinformation on Twitter. A fence stood between them and their sweaty savior, which Ralsei quickly cleared and grabbed the bastard. Jerry squirmed in Ralsei's arms. "Hey, put me down. I was just about to absolutely pwn the..." "Shut up!" Franziska yelled as she whipped the lumpy chud, causing Ralsei to drop him unceremoniously on the sidewalk. "Ouchie!" yelled Jerry as he tumbled to a halt. He looked up at Franziska and smiled. "Well, hello there, milady. I assume you need my help?" Franziska ready to stomp the little asshole to death, but she was stopped when Pheonix picked up the monster and threw him directly into a horde of spawn. "Nick!" Maya yelled. "What the heck did you do that for?" Ralsei stepped forward, pointing towards the spawn as Jerry made an impact. Each of them made a shrill noise that sounded like someone getting ready to throw up, before shriveling up and turning to dust. The 3 humans stared on in surprise, especially Pheonix as he was not expecting that to work. Nonchalantly, Ralsei lifted Jerry and turned to the others. "Right. We need to get you 3 to higher ground. I'll learn the Arch-Titan over here and use Jerry on him." However, Franziska put her boot down as Jerry blew kissy faces at her. "Oh, hell no! I am not working with that creep!" Before Ralsei could say some crap about needing to do it for the good of the world, they heard a thud as Percy landed near them.
"I'll take your place then,"
he said as he rested the end of his hammer against the ground.
"Me and the homies got this. Go help the others."
It took her a second, but eventually Franziska took off running as Pheonix and Maya both fist-bumped Percy. Pheonix cradled Rory King as he looked over the dwarf's hammer, noticing a bit of webbing on top. "Oh, damn. Can you get us to higher ground? Ralsei's gonna lure the Arch-Titan to us, and we're gonna use this little guy to beat him." His tone made it clear he had no idea what the Arch-Titan was.
So, we're going after the big one then.
Percy retorted, able to crack a guess at what he meant.
Right then, you two hold on tight.
Maya held the squirming Jerry with one arm as she clutched the dwarf's arm with another. Pheonix grabbed onto his other, clutching Rory King. Ralsei smiled, waving at them as they launched off towards the top of a skyscraper via one of the hammer's webs, both humans screaming loudly as they were whisked off. The trio landed on top of one of the city's tallest buildings, staring out to try and spy how the others were doing through the advanced darkness. Pheonix and Maya were shocked to see the old, crusty judge land a serious blow on one of the other titans, allowing Rose to finally banish it with a large blast of purple light. One of the other titans had been considerably weakened, as Slayer was currently breaking its fucking ankles. Above the city, they noticed the Roaring Knight surveying all of this, while aura farming to the extreme. Shortly, though, its attention and their attention was grabbed by a large flash of light on a nearby street. Down below, Ralsei floated near the Archtitan's feet, flashing light magic as he tried to capture its attention. Soon enough, his plan succeeded, and the massive beast looked down to investigate this disturbance. Its 8 wings fluttered around its face as it spotted the small Darkner, who set off another burst of light magic. It let out a low grumble before letting loose a massive, distorted roar. Twin spikes burst from its shoulder and arms, vibrating as it began trying to stomp towards Ralsei. Nervously, the goat boy took off back the way he came, but continued setting off light flashes to lure the Archtitan towards the building where Pheonix and co stood. As the group watched the Archtitan approach, each prepared themselves for battle. Pheonix held Rory King like a cannon, tightening his grip as the ground began to shake. Maya readied the magic supplied to her by the Dark World, a green aura surrounding her hands as the air got colder. Percy loaded Metal Gear Solid into his PSP, his breath visible as the cold continued to take hold. Jerry scratched his ass and then sniffed his hand. Ralsei took off and stopped the flashes as the Archtitan's attention was focused on the 3 impromptu heroes. The knight had followed its spawn, investigating what paltry attempt the city offered as defense. Before any of them could react, the Archtitan lifted a hand and fired a massive beam of darkness towards their position. Pheonix and Maya only managed to get out of the way in time as the PSP Dwarf swiftly snapped his disc back to Spider-Man 2, before using the hammer's webs to pull the pair out of the way. He swapped it back as the Archtitan began to summon multitudes of the spawn. A dark centipede began to fly and hover towards him, gnashing what could only be its mouth at the frightened heroes. With some quick thinking, though, Pheonix loaded a nearby bit of rubble into Rory King's trunk and blasted it at the creature. It soared straight through the beast, cutting it in half and causing it to dissipate into chunks of light. With a confident smirk, he continued to fire away at the other approaching spawn and centipedes that dare attack the heroes. Percy joined him in firing rockets from his hammer as Metal Gear Solid spun within its metal confines. Pheonix had never felt so alive, blasting the bastards like it was nothing more than an arcade game. What he failed to notice during his mirth, though, was the Archtitan rearing back its 2 hands, with its wicked claws primed to skewer the trio where they stood. However, as it plunged its daggers towards them, Maya threw her hands out to the side. Her Magatama glowed brightly as 2 large shields of green magic formed on either side of the group. This blocked the Archtitan's attack, though it was clear that Maya was visibly struggling to hold them up. Eventually, the Archtitan pulled back, and Maya promptly fell to her knees while panting heavily. Percy jogged over to check on her, helping her up from where she had fallen. All 3 knew that they couldn't hold up against this forever. Somewhere they would slip up. Somewhere they would falter. That was when Pheonix made the executive decision to rush towards where Jerry had been sitting off to the side, looking generally disinterested in whatever was going on. Pheonix grabbed Jerry and shoved him inside Rory King's trunk. "Objection!" he screamed as a battle cry as he fired the Chud directly at the Archtitan. Percy and Maya eased up as Jerry seemed like he was going to hit the Titan square in the forehead. However, Jerry simply bounced off its hardened exterior. As the Chud ragdolled down the beast towards the city street, all present stared at him and his flopping limbs. Once Jerry had landed, the Archtitan focused his attention back on the group. Spawn began to form around the group as the beast's claws primed to strike. Maya turned towards Pheonix.
I thought that was supposed to work, Nick! Did you launch him wrong?
Pheonix shrugged as he turned towards her, shrugging as Rory King struggled to try and shoot down the ever-growing army of Spawn.
I don't know, okay? I was just doing what Ralsei said to do.
Percy pressed the button on his hammer, which proceeded to fire several rockets at the Archtitan. However, none of them managed to break its armor.
So, we're fucked. Great.
He grumbled as the Spawn began to close in. As they all braced for the end, they suddenly heard the sound of a flurry of slashes. They all looked up as they heard the Arch-Titan roar, only to find that the spawn had all been cut in half, and the beast's facial armor had been cracked severely. The knight stared in shock at something behind them, causing them to turn around and stare at the same beautiful sight. Behind them was a man glowing with an intense golden aura. Even without a single word from this man, they were stunned by his liquidity and riz. Internally, even the knight had to admit that shit was skibbity. Stunned, Pheonix finally managed to speak. Who are you? That's when the man began to sing.
Hey, need a hand, they all call me the motherfucking drink. I'll stab you in your stink, 'cause I am the motherfucking drink. You can't win, I am him, and I'll send you to Frieza on a whim. Now let's go, kill the hoe. Come on, Pheonix, let's get this fucker. Let's go!
As he finished the verse, Trunks, more commonly known as the Drink, joined their side. He brandished his blade as the Titan backed up in fear. He turned towards Pheonix, continuing his song.
I'm the hero, and you're the bad guy.
Pheonix joined in, cheering him on.
Hell yeah, man, we will show the city my liquidity. You are a beast who has not seen my mind.
Trunks continued as he began charging up 2 blasts in his hands.
Buster Cannon time!
Trunks launched his attack, hitting the Titan in the face armor, and not only completely destroying it, but launched a hole through its face. It cried out in song as it writhed in pain.
Oh, I'm getting hit! Oh fuck, why didn't you tell me about the Sky Knight? Oh, Roaring Knight! Rudy, why didn't you say he could do this?
Even the Knight was surprised by the attack, backing away from the group as it began its own verse.
Oh my god, he's the drink! I better keep my ass with Palpatine! Holy shit! I can't think! Is that man a motherfucking beverage of sorts?
As the Knight fled and the Titan clung on to life, the heroes continued to attack this already wounded Arch-Titan with any ranged attacks. Their Jean Vest-clad savior continued to sing as they bombarded him with missiles and magic.
The Ace Attorney and the motherfucking drink now strike you as one.
Pheonix joined in, cheering him on.
Hell yeah, man, we will show the city my... Hey, wait, did we already do this part?
The drink continued as Maya stepped in beside him. She joined in near immediately as she launched multiple magic bolts at the falling beast.
You and his ass, we shall bring victory tonight as one.
Trunks grinned as he began charging up his Buster Cannon once more.
We'll buster as one.
He screamed as he fired it out at the Arch-Titan, which was now kneeling on the ground. Pheonix used Rory King to launch a couple more cannonballs as Maya joined them with some more magic bolts. Percy began mashing the button on his hammer, firing a massive barrage of missiles at the creature. The attacks hit at once, nearly obliterating the poor bastard as Rose and the others appeared on the scene, having dealt with the other Titans. As what was left of the Arch-Titan laid on the pavement, Rose used her soul magic to quickly and easily banish the thing. Susie gave a wide grin as she looked up towards the 4 heroes atop the building. She pumped her fist in celebration as she laughed. We won! Let's go! In the skies above the city, as the motley crew of heroes celebrated their victory over the darkness, the Knight flew over the remains of the catastrophe it had escalated. A small ringing noise was heard from where its pocket would be. Without much delay, the Knight reached down and grabbed the communicator. It held it up to its helmet as it continued to fly. The voice of Emperor Palpatine echoed from the other end. I see you've been busy in Japanifornia. Good. The weaker Earth's forces are, the better. Our plan has almost come to fruition, my knight. However, in order to secure our victory, you are needed at Dr. Eggman's base in Utauslovia. May the proletariat be with you. Once the call had ended, the knight put their communicator back in their pocket and sped off towards Western Europe. Once the smoke had cleared, Rose, Menat, and the rest of the courtroom crew returned to the fountain that erupted earlier that day. Without any further interruptions, Rose swiftly managed to close it. Meanwhile, Susie, Ralsei, and Slayer returned to the Wright & Co. office. They entered to find a now fully healthy Lancer, who's being dribbled by Sharon for enrichment. After a couple celebratory noogies from Susie, the crew returned to the courtroom as well. Though most of the gallery had gone home for the day, once all the important players were present, the trial would continue. The judge took his seat once more, not before first having to clear some of the rubble in the way.
Right then. I believe that we have received plenty of evidence from both sides. I am prepared to deliver my verdict.
The courtroom was silent, though less from tension this time and more due to exhaustion caused by the prior battle. One person in particular, though, was oddly silent. The judge's voice changed to his goofier tone as he looked at said person, raising a gray eyebrow.
Any comments, Prosecutor Von Karma? No objections? No beating the shit out of us?
Franziska closed her eyes, turning away from both the judge and the defense. I have nothing left to present, Your Honor. You may make your judgment.
For the crimes of illegal vehicle modification and arson, I hereby pronounce that the defendant, Lancer Chaos, is not guilty.
The judge stated loudly as he banged his gavel against the desk. Everyone erupted into cheers as those in the gallery rushed down to the floor. Susie ran over and lifted up Lancer in excitement before setting him down and initiating a secret handshake that it would take a college degree to decipher. Ralsei began spawning confetti and tossing it over the room, as Detective Gumshoe was busy searching for some escaped convicts and couldn't make it. Rose and the other fighters simply watched the celebration play out, though the aforementioned psychic was surprised by a tight hug from her apprentice. The drink stood among them, smirking before taking off back to the skies once more. Franziska silently left the room, only allowing herself to smile when her face was out of view. Pheonix smiled as he looked around the room, and especially at his client. He soon noticed Percy walking up to him, holding his hand out to the lawyer. The two shared a firm handshake before the dwarf turned to give the same for Maya. However, the psychic reached down and gave him a tight hug, which he soon reciprocated. She glanced up at Pheonix, who begrudgingly crouched down and hugged both of them tightly. Each of them knew that no matter how small this trial should have been, no matter who was present, this was truly the return of the Ace Attorney to a courtroom that needed his brand of justice. From there, after the events of a very catastrophic war between the people of Earth and the Galactic Empire, Pheonix managed to revamp and revive Wright & Co. law offices. He hired on a couple new promising lawyers who shared his passion for justice and defending the innocent. While Maya came and went due to her new duties as a shrine maiden, Percy stuck around to fill her place whenever she was indisposed. As the city finally began to rebuild from both the Roaring and the War for Earth, more and more began to return to see the Ace Attorney take on cases and defend the innocent who needed defending. Even after all that this place had been through, hope could be found in a man who would face whatever trials and tribulations to save those whom he knew to be innocent. Like a phoenix from the ashes, Pheonix Wright would once again bring justice for all. And that's the end of Unfrantic Fanfic 7. Time for the big guns.